In this video, we're going to be discussing how to find the equation of a straight line given the graph of that straight line. So the equation on screen is the standard form of a straight line. Now, obviously, your x value is your input value, your y value is your output value. Now, your x value gets processed by being multiplied by the coefficient of x, which is m, which is also the gradient or slope of the line. And then from that, you also add on c, which is the y-intercept. Okay, now the reason why c is the y-intercept is because if x is equal to 0, now at x is equal to 0 is the y-axis. So at x equal to 0, your m gets cancelled out because m times by 0, no matter what m is, it's going to be 0. So y is equal to c, and you assume your x to be 0 because it's already multiplied out with the m and got rid of that. So that's why you can say that your c is your y-intercept. So now your y-intercept can be positive, as in it can be in that part of the graph. Your y-intercept can be negative, it can be at 0, or you may not have a y-intercept. For example, if you have a vertical line. Now your gradient can be positive, where you have an upward sloped line. It can be negative. It can be 0, where your line is horizontal, or it can be undefined, where your line is vertical. And I'll get to those two in a moment. Now your gradient is really just your change in y, delta y, over your change in x, delta x. So to get a change, you have to have 2 points. So let's say you have point which is x1, y1, and you have a point on your graph which is x2, y2. Now, your gradient is just the change in these points. So to get from this point here to this point here, we say y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And that gives us the gradient. So let's go ahead and do a few examples. And we'll find the equation of these lines. But before we do this, we have to know that in order to find the equation of a straight line, we either need 2 points or we need the gradient and another point. So let's go ahead and solve the equation of this line. So we notice that we do have 2 points. We have this one here, and we have this one here. This point here is 0 and negative 2. And this one here is negative 1 and 0. So if we go and calculate the gradient, we can say it is 0 minus negative 2 over minus 1 minus 0. Now you'll see here that this 0 is the x-coordinate here, and this negative 2 is the y-coordinate here. This 0 is the y-coordinate here, and this negative 1 is the x-coordinate here. So this will give us a gradient of 2 over negative 1, which is negative 2. So therefore we have y is equal to negative 2x plus c. Now we already said that c is our y-intercept, and we can see that this intersects the y-axis at negative 2. So therefore the equation of our line is y is equal to negative 2x minus 2. Let's move on. So here we have 2 points again, so this is possible. Now we'll use the same method. We'll first find the gradient, but now it's not so obvious because we haven't been given the y-intercept. We'll have to work it out, and I'll show you how to do that. So here, our gradient is, we take this y value, 5, minus that y value, minus 3, over the x value that corresponded with the 5, which was 4, and then we take the x value that corresponded with the 3, which was negative 4, so minus negative 4. And this will give us a gradient of 2 over 4 minus minus 4 is 4 plus 4, which is 8, so it gives us a gradient of 1 over 4. So now we have y is equal to 1 over 4x plus c, but we don't know this y-intercept. So we're going to sub in one of these points for an x and y, and we'll be left with only the c value, and we can then solve for that. So let's sub in 4 and 5. Okay, so we have 5 is equal to 1 over 4 times by 4 plus c. So 5 is equal to 1 plus c. So c is equal to 5 minus 1, which is 4. And there we have the equation of the straight line. Y is equal to 1 over 4x plus 4. Let's do another one. So this is what I was referring to earlier when we have a horizontal line. Now obviously it's quite easy to see that the equation of this line is just y is equal to 4. And the reason why that's quite obvious is because if you just look along here, for any x value, every single y value is going to be 4. So your x value doesn't actually need to be processed. Because if I were to take x equal to 4, I still land up with y equal to 4. If I take x equal to 0, I still land up with y equal to 4. So it's quite simple that this is 4, but let's go ahead with this method where we go from our standard form, and we'll prove to you why it's true. So if we take the gradient here, what we notice, gradient is the change in y over the change in x. So the change in y is 0 because this line is horizontal. So no matter what point you take, the change in y is always going to be 0. And the change in x can be any number, so we'll leave it as that. Now, what this works out to is equal to 0. So what we have is y is equal to 0x plus c, which is just y is equal to c. So c is the y-intercept, so we have y is equal to 4. Now for the vertical line, it's quite easy to see here that our equation is just x is equal to negative 2, because everywhere on the graph your x value is going to be negative 2. So for whatever y value this time, our x value is always going to be negative 2. And it's quite easy to see that. But then let's do it intuitively like we did for this graph. Let's work it out with the formula. Y is equal to mx plus c. Well, let's work out the gradient. M is equal to change in y over the change in x. Now the change in x is always going to be 0 because your x value doesn't change. Now your change in y can be anything, so we'll leave that. And now you notice that your gradient is undefined. You don't have a gradient. So therefore, your m is undefined. So now, if your m is undefined, then you can't really express this graph in terms of x, because you can't multiply anything by x. Your graph is always going to be equal to x, and you're not going to have a y-intercept, so your c value doesn't exist either. So that's why the equation of this graph is simply x is equal to -2. And let's do one last example. So here they've given us the gradient. So right away, we can go and write y is equal to -1/4x plus c. And now, usually we'd just go and look and see what the y-intercept is, but it's not so obvious in this example because it's in between 2 and 3, and it doesn't really look like 2.5. It could be -2.25, but it's a bit of a guess, so we'll have to work it out. So what are we going to do? We're going to sub in this point because that's a known point for us. So we'll sub that in. Y is going to be -1 is equal to -1/4 times by your x, which is going to be -5, and then plus c. So what we have here is -1 is equal to 5/4, because those negatives cancel out, plus c. So now we have c is equal to -1 minus 5/4, which is c is equal to -4/4 minus 5/4, because -1 is simply -4/4. We're just making it easy for ourselves to simplify, and we get -9/4. So we therefore find that our equation is y is equal to -1/4x minus 9/4. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you.